Hello. For the second time in recorded history, British UK politics is being honest. Within the cabinet, the inner circle of this non-living entity called government, there is a Jeremy Hunt. Yes, they all are. I said second time there's been honesty in British politics. The first time was when there was the Israeli government. I maintain that that has never changed. I am open to the ideas that humanity was created as a slave race. That was the original intention. It's not a very pleasant thought that humanity may well be a hybrid, a combination of two things created to serve a function as a slave to something else. But I ask you to consider, look around the external world. Is it fair to say that many people are slaves to money through mortgages, loans, maintaining a particular lifestyle, or for whatever reason? It requires labour in some form, giving away your time to earn money to maintain whatever it is you're trying to maintain. It is keeping you enslaved. But at the same time, if you go along with this idea or are open to this idea, what also comes out of that is that which created humanity did so but with an intention that humanity would be able to free itself. You just have to look at the animal kingdom compared to the human kingdom, to mankind, and consider that the one thing that separates us from the animal kingdom is the awareness of individuality, the awareness of the personal I. So you are distinct from everybody else. I was listening to a beautiful lecture by Alan Watts, who talks from the perspective of a writer and the dictionary, and how a dictionary maintains a standard of a correct way of language. So there are rules, but you have an evolving language. Languages evolve, and therefore words change in their meaning. He uses the example of the word dig. Can you dig it, as opposed to can you dig it out the ground? It's now sort of taken as a level of understanding, going deep within, basically, when you dig something in that context. But it is a good example of you have a formal set of rules and then a requirement to break those rules, because the rules, when they're not in balance, become very restrictive. There is no room to maneuver, and it kills creativity by creating uniformity. which intuitively humanity does not like the idea of if it can see it. If it cannot see it, if it cannot see the restrictions and limitations, then it will not try and break out of it. I also listened to a wonderful Neville Goddard lecture, and he talks about David being the Son rather than Jesus. So I thought we'd examine that from the etymology. Keep in mind there are vowel shifts. So what you have with David, the I and the A, the AI, but we change it to two I's, or we could change it to two A's. It doesn't matter, it's a David or a Divid. It's the same thing. Pronunciation. Just like you probably may hear the term cabinet, the inner circle of the government, the sort of first line of ministers, the equivalent of I think it's Congress in the United States. But I don't hear cabinet. I hear ka, ba, in, net. It's how you hear things, how you see things. So let's look at David. It is a huge clue. The system has given us all a clue, and it is often quoted that the world is controlled by a mechanism called divide and conquer. So, let's have a think about that. So with David, you have a palindrome. You have a mirror of itself. Whichever way you read this, from left to right or from right to left, you're going to start with D, I, and then V in the middle. Do you see the V? What it is actually showing, if you read it quite literally, is die, I, D. Because when you ascend, or try to ascend and raise yourself up without the awareness of the unity within oneself, you are becoming further separated from your core, from your essence. You'll see here that it's death of the ID, death of the artificial identity. That can be in official terms, that can be in the way you perceive yourself when you attach yourself to a nationality or an organization and describe yourself as that, rather than as being an individual sovereign living being. But look what else is shown here. We talk about the fall of man. Well, what happens when you fall? The V comes together. It becomes one. This then becomes the cornerstone on which you build. And then you can take that middle path. It also starts to resemble a flower, a stem with two leaves coming out, because it is a new flowering. So if you think of it in terms of chakras, the wisdom, the power, the gut instinct, that is the solar plexus, the place of the sun. But for you to rise as a unified whole, you have to fall to the root, to the base upon which to build. There is your cornerstone. It is within you. You change the polarity. So effectively, what you've now got is a diamond shape. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the clouds so high, like a diamond in the sky. The sky is within your mind. It's your third eye, it's your diamond. It's all about communication and finding balance in this reality. So, communication, let's look at that. Think like a child. As a child, our imaginations are far more active. You can probably relate to this, even if you can't actually remember it, but probably you will have a memory of this. Those monsters under the bed, those imaginary monsters in the wardrobe or behind the door that hide in the shadows in the corner of the room. I was reminded of this by a very good friend. It's a perfect analogy. A child would instinctively go under the covers of the bed and block their ears and eyes and shut the outside world out. Because those monsters are imaginary, they are created in the child's mind in their imagination. They've let their imagination run wild. But if you were to face your demons, those monsters, as a child, you would see that there is nothing there and there is nothing to fear. As we are further programmed by the system to always perceive things in a negative way, as an adult, because that is what a child becomes, a complete dolt, because they lose that inner child through the programming. They forget who they are. But if you can retain that memory, but with the wisdom of experience, to know that you are just frightened of imaginary monsters that you create in your mind, the body will intuitively give the brain signals. We are always the last to know. We are presented with a foreign language when we are presented with a sensation in the body called anxiety or panic attack or depression. Depression, think about the word, you're depressing the eye on. You're shutting down, you're going within, you are hiding under that blanket. You are blocking your eyes and ears to the external world because you know instinctively there is something not quite right about it. The body sends that signal up to the brain. The brain does not understand this new revelation, this new sensation. It doesn't know what is communicated because of the programming. The mind or the brain will say, "What is wrong with me?" Many will fall for the various rabbit holes. Alcohol, drugs, gambling, all kinds of distractions that take away as a temporary fix that unpleasant feeling, that having the possibility of having to face this imaginary monster. The body is telling you. Now imagine having an inner standing of what that body sensations are communicating to the brain. How different that might feel. I speak here as one from experience of all three of these things: anxiety, depression, and panic attacks. Panic attacks are when there is a total imbalance. It's like an electric shock. It's a feeling of drowning. It's a horrible sensation. It is where the mind and body are in conflict. The body knows intuitively, the gut is trying to tell you. The brain is being stubborn and from a place of ignorance because it doesn't understand the language being communicated by the body. The easiest way out of a panic attack is to simply breathe. Deep, slow, controlled breaths. Just as the imagination can run wild, so the interpretation of the sensations from the body can also run wild when we don't understand what they are. The anxiety is another irrational fear of an imagination, a miscommunication between body and mind, because we are not at one when we are experiencing those. But those experiences are guiding us to walking this spiritual path, to seeing things in a new perspective, opening new doors, closing old doors, seeing things in a new way, experiencing new sensations. It is all about coming out of the comfort zone, stepping into the unknown. Otherwise, we would not grow. Likewise, the perception of this serpent in the garden that suggests the knowledge of good and evil. Well, if you did not have the knowledge of good and evil, if you did not have the ability to weigh things up and think for yourself, you would be just a slave race. But that knowledge, it can also come out of balance and then turn into something that becomes very egoic. It is not just about knowledge. The knowledge in the sense of intellect, without the wisdom of love added to this, will give a very different result. But the true intellect will come to a point to understand that the intellect is just a stepping stone that can only take you so far. It involves stepping out of oneself, relinquishing the power, surrendering to oneself, handing over the controls to the real brain, which is a cellular structure in the heart, coming from the heart, not coming from the brain. That will lead us down all sorts of rabbit holes, temptations, distractions. They serve a necessary purpose, but they will keep distracting us, pulling us off the path while we give in to them. It's about balance. Just like that yin and yang symbol, it's like an S, like the serpent. It's weighing up between the light and the dark, walking that middle path. But it's as flexible as a tree has to be in the wind. It's rooted in the heart, which is in the earth, but at the same time, it's not rigid and fixed and closed-minded, otherwise it would snap. It doesn't put up a resistance. Nature adapts. If you are getting anxiety or depression or panic attacks, they are just bodily sensations. If you can understand that what is happening is, it's not what is wrong with me, it is, wow, I'm adapting, I'm evolving, I've taken the first step. Now ask yourself how that feels if you have that perception on anxiety and depression and panic attacks. Because the panic attacks are just where the feelings have been allowed to go out of control, and that's why it becomes this panic attack, this anxiety, because we are not in control of our emotions, because we don't understand the communication from the body. So the going within, as much as anything else, is having an understanding of these avatars In the same way that you have to familiarize yourself with a vehicle before you can drive it, you need to know where all the controls and all the dials are. You need to be comfortable in that vehicle. Not too comfortable that you fall asleep where the vehicle is in motion when you are supposed to be in control of it, but at least familiar enough with the controls to know how to control that vehicle so it doesn't cause harm or injury to another road user in that particular instance. And by road user, I mean pedestrian, I mean the cat or the dog that's running across the road, the bird that's... It's about anticipation, and it's through experience with driving. Likewise, when we are walking this path, it's the same thing. And that walking refers back to Genesis, which Alan Watts and Neville Goddard talk about. It's God moved across the face of the earth. Well, it's an action, it's doing, it's moving. It's taking a step forward to enable something to happen. It's going in, tiptoeing into the swamp. But there comes a point where the fear has a limit. You can go beyond that. It's like the storm. In the center of the eye of the storm, it is perfectly calm. You are the center of the world, so you are the center of the sort of the vortex, the eye. Because when you describe yourself in the first tense, do you not say I this or I am that? There's the I at the center of everything. It is a you, an I, all of us. And the world can seem very chaotic whichever way you look when you're in that center spot. But you can navigate your way through it. You can find a way through it where you will come to no harm. The first part of that is to understand the communication from the body to the brain, to bring things into unity. The center, the balance, is the place to be with this. Physically, that is the heart. In the chakra system, that is the heart. That is where to come from. That is where to operate from. And as Alan Watts, in his analogy, says, a photographer can take a picture of an ashtray or a pile of junk and make it look beautiful. If we were to see something highly symmetrical and organized in a kaleidoscope, this is the example he uses, it would look so regimented and so restricted we would not like it. But through art, through the art of creation, through seeing things in a new way, that ashtray or that pile of rubbish becomes something very beautiful to behold, to perceive. We create something new out of something that's sort of on the like destruction or something that is perceived unpleasant. So it's finding the balance within oneself. It's finding the communication within oneself, with oneself. And then we're like the concave earth. We are at the center. And we radiate out. But think about this, as Ken Wheeler has described, electricity is the hybrid of the dielectric and the magnet. Humanity is potentially the hybrid of a hominid and the Anuna, or the Anunnaki if you prefer. I would say that all Anunnaki means is Anuna Arcadian. It's a conflation of two words because it is written from a Babylonian perspective. So Anuna, or Anuna Arcadian, is a bit of a mouthful to say, so it's easier to conflate it and contract it into a shorter word. Again, you can see this in modern day language. Do you say cannot or do you say can't? Do you say do not or do you say don't? Language is a part of a living communication. We are in these living avatars to have this experience from birth to death, to take away from this reality. So it's learning to communicate with oneself as much as anything else. Rather a lot to ponder in this one. I let it meander as where it was going to go. But I hope that if you are one of those that does suffer from anxiety or depression or panic attacks, try perceiving this in a new way. Go within oneself and try and get the feeling of what is being communicated by the body. Ask yourself, seeing it from that perception, how do you feel? Always ask yourself these questions, because this is all about you. The questions we need to ask ourselves individually within inside ourselves, an internal dialogue. It's the great play. That's the one to really take a part in, because that internal dialogue, you are the star. There can be no other but you in your internal dialogue within you. Love to you all, and may this help at least one of you out there.